Have you ever felt like you were being tested, not by life, but by people? The ones who talk over you. The ones who make those subtle jabs and pretend they're just jokes. The ones who act like your time, your thoughts, your boundaries don't matter. It's exhausting, and if you're honest, you've probably let it slide more times than you'd like to admit. Not because you're weak, but because you were trying to keep the peace. But what if keeping the peace has been costing you your dignity? In today's episode of the Chill Stoic, we're going to strip away the noise, the fake smiles, the forced politeness, and get real. Because there's a deeper, quieter form of strength that doesn't yell, doesn't chase approval, and doesn't entertain disrespect. It doesn't fight for the spotlight. It simply refuses to be moved. This isn't about becoming aggressive. It's about becoming unshakable. So let's start where it all begins, with the art of presence. The power of stillness. The quiet confidence that says, "You don't get to shake me." Welcome part 1. Embrace the silent stare. You ever notice how some people seem to make it their mission to test your patience? They cut you off mid-sentence, toss passive-aggressive jabs your way, act like your time, your emotions, your presence, are somehow optional. And we've all been conditioned to just smile, nod, keep the peace. But today, that ends. Because the truth is, there comes a time in every person's life when you draw a line in the sand. Not with shouting, not with drama, but with dignity. This episode is for anyone who's tired of being walked over, disrespected, dismissed. We're going to talk about how to stand your ground without raising your voice, how to reclaim your space without throwing punches, how to command respect in the most powerful way possible, by doing less. Let's start with something simple. So simple it almost sounds too passive. But don't underestimate it. It's a move that speaks louder than words. It's what I call the silent stare. Now I know what you're thinking. Seriously? Just stare at them? Trust me, yes. But not just any stare. I'm talking about a calm, composed, unshakable stare. The kind of gaze that doesn't blink, doesn't flinch, doesn't fold. Why does this work? Because people who are disrespectful, those who test your limits, they're looking for a reaction. They want you to snap, to defend, to justify, to break. It gives them power. But when you meet their chaos with complete stillness, something shifts. The power dynamic flips. You're no longer playing by their rules. You're setting your own. I remember being in a team meeting once, and there was this guy, loud, arrogant, steamrolling over every voice in the room, especially mine. He kept interrupting, talking over me like I was invisible. I tried being polite. I tried rephrasing, jumping in. Nothing worked. So I stopped talking. I leaned back in my chair, crossed my arms, and I just looked at him. Not a glare, not a smirk, just a steady, neutral stare that lasted about 5 seconds, but felt like eternity. And then something fascinating happened. He tripped over his words, lost his rhythm, started looking around like he was waiting for someone to save him from the awkwardness. And after that moment, he didn't interrupt me again. That, right there, was the turning point. The silent stare isn't about being rude. It's about being unbothered. It's you saying with your energy, "I'm not playing that game. I see what you're doing, and it won't work on me." There's a reason this works on such a deep level. Most people who disrespect others aren't even fully conscious of it. They've never been challenged, never faced real consequences for being dismissive or controlling. When you stare at them silently, it forces them to sit in their own discomfort. You're not correcting them. You're holding up a mirror. That mirror is often more painful than any argument could ever be. And here's the beauty of it, when you learn to hold that space, that stare, you're not just taking back control of the moment. You're reclaiming your self-worth. You're reminding yourself that you don't owe anyone an emotional reaction. You don't need to shrink yourself to keep the peace. You don't need to laugh it off when someone says something cruel but funny. You don't need to explain yourself when your boundaries are violated. You just look, and you let the silence do the heavy lifting. Because sometimes the strongest thing you can say is nothing. I used to be the kind of person who tried to smooth everything over. Someone would say something rude, and I'd smile awkwardly, or laugh nervously, or change the subject, but every time I did that, a part of me felt smaller, like I was trading my dignity for momentary comfort. Learning to hold the silent stare changed that. It's more than a tactic, it's a declaration. A declaration that says, I know who I am. I don't need to prove anything to you. And I will not let your behavior define my energy. So if you find yourself in a conversation where someone is pushing your buttons, testing your limits, trying to get a rise out of you, don't feed it. Don't engage. Just pause, take a breath, and hold the moment with your eyes. Let them feel your calm. Let them see that you don't need to raise your voice to be powerful. You'd be surprised how quickly things change when you stop chasing respect and start embodying it. Your silence can be a storm that shakes their assumptions, a storm that says, I'm done explaining myself to people who don't deserve access to me. The next time you feel disrespected, try it. Don't defend, don't explain, just look, and in that stare, let them realize they no longer have the upper hand. Because in the end, the silent stare isn't about them. It's about you. It's about standing tall, without lifting a finger. Part 2. Embrace silence as your answer. Let me tell you a truth that most people don't want to hear: silence is not weakness. In fact, it may be the most powerful answer you'll ever give. We live in a world that constantly demands a reaction. People say something out of line, and the first instinct is to clap back. Defend yourself. Make it clear you won't be disrespected. But let me ask you, how many times has defending yourself actually made you feel better? Stronger? More whole? Often, it just leaves you more exhausted, more entangled in their negativity, more drained of the peace you were trying to protect. Because here's the truth. People who dish out disrespect are rarely looking for understanding. They're looking for chaos. They want a rise. They want your energy, your frustration, your emotional investment, because it gives them a sense of control. But when you choose silence, when you stand firm and simply do not engage, you remove their power, you cut off their supply. And that silence? It's louder than any comeback. It's not you giving up. It's you rising above. It's not you backing down. It's you deciding this moment, this person, this behavior, does not deserve your attention. I remember a time when someone I knew constantly made these little jokes at my expense. You know the kind. Those harmless digs that cut just deep enough to leave a sting. And for the longest time, I played along. I'd laugh it off, try to match their wit, or later replay the moment in my head, crafting the perfect response I wish I'd given. But nothing changed, until one day, when they threw one of those comments out in a room full of people. I did something different. I said absolutely nothing. No expression, no reaction. I just looked at them, let the silence sit in the air like a weight they couldn't carry, and waited. The moment grew uncomfortable, not for me, but for them. Their smirk faded, their voice faltered, and they never tried that again. Because silence has a way of shining a light on someone's behavior without you needing to lift a single word. It makes them face themselves, without the buffer of your defense. It's not passive, it's intentional. It's strength wearing stillness. Choosing silence is choosing self-respect. It's telling the world, I don't owe you my peace. I don't have to trade my calm for your chaos. You want a reaction? Find it elsewhere. You want drama? I'm not your actor. You want to feel superior by dragging me down? You'll have to reach higher. Because I'm not coming down there. And this isn't just about others. This is about you, too. When you choose silence, you preserve your own energy. You reclaim your emotional real estate. You stop renting out space in your mind to people who have never paid a single moment of respect. You stop explaining, stop justifying, stop bleeding yourself dry trying to be understood by people committed to misunderstanding you. There is so much freedom in the pause. So much strength in the stillness. I used to believe silence meant weakness, that if I didn't speak up, I was letting them win. But with time, I learned something deeper. Every time I chose to hold my tongue, I was choosing myself. Every time I let their words hang in the air unanswered, I was building inner strength. I was learning that not every battle is worth fighting, and not every opinion deserves a response. The moment you stop responding to every insult, every accusation, every poke at your character, you take back control, you create distance, you create peace, and eventually, they stop. Because the game isn't fun when you refuse to play. Silence becomes your armor, your boundary, your truth. It's a soft but unshakable message that says, I see you, but I choose me. And that is a radical act of self-love. So the next time someone throws shade, makes a snide remark, or tries to provoke you into a reaction, pause, breathe, and say nothing. Let the silence speak the words you don't need to. Watch their discomfort grow, and your clarity rise, because in that moment, you'll realize, silence isn't the absence of a voice. It's the presence of wisdom. And some things are far too sacred to waste on noise. Part 3. Stop explaining your choices. Let's be real for a moment. How many times have you made a decision that felt right for you, only to have someone question it the moment they hear about it? Why do you do that? Why didn't you go to that party? Why do you take that job or end that relationship? Why aren't you doing things the way they would? And before you know it, you find yourself stumbling through an explanation, defending your actions like you're on trial for simply living your life. But here's the hard truth you need to hear: your life does not require a jury. You don't owe anyone an explanation for the choices you make to protect your peace. Honor your purpose, or follow your truth, and the moment you stop over-explaining yourself is the moment you step fully into your own power. The reason people demand explanations so often isn't because they genuinely care. Sometimes, it's because your decision makes them uncomfortable. It shines a light on their own inaction, their own fear, their own need to conform. When you choose a different path, maybe a riskier one, maybe one they wouldn't have the courage to take, it disrupts their comfort zone. And instead of facing that discomfort, they turn it into interrogation. They poke, they prod, not to understand, but to reduce, to shrink you back down into something that fits their version of the world. But here's the truth: you don't exist to make people comfortable. You don't need to wrap your choices in neat little bows just to keep others from feeling uneasy. I remember when I left what most people would call a stable job. A corporate role, good salary, benefits, the kind of thing people stay in for decades even when they're miserable. And I walked away. No backup plan, no applause, just a quiet knowing in my gut that said, this isn't it. And almost instantly, the questions came. Why would you leave security? How are you going to survive? What if it doesn't work out? At first, I tried to explain. I talked about dreams, passion, freedom, meaning, but no matter how much logic I offered, it wasn't enough, because they weren't really asking, they were projecting. And once I realized that, I changed my answer. I stopped justifying. When someone asked me why, I said, because I wanted to. That was it. No long monologue, no defense, just truth, my truth. And you know what happened? They stopped asking. Because when you stop engaging in the approval game, people start to realize they're not holding the cards anymore. There's so much freedom in that moment, the moment you stop over-explaining and start owning. It's when you say, I don't need you to understand. I don't need your permission. My choices are valid because I chose them. That's it. That's all. And let's be honest, people who truly respect you won't need an explanation. They'll support you, even if they don't fully get it. They'll stand beside you, not behind their own judgment. It's only those who seek to control, to undermine, or to compete who demand a play-by-play of your decisions. Don't give them that power. Because the more you explain, the more you invite doubt, not just from them, but from yourself. You start to second-guess. You start to overthink, and slowly, the decision that once felt like freedom starts to feel like a burden. But when you stand firm, when you say, this is what I'm doing and I don't need to explain it, you build an inner foundation that's unshakable. That's what Stoic philosophy teaches us. That your approval must come from within. That your peace isn't up for debate. Marcus Aurelius once said, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." You don't have to over-justify the right path. You simply have to walk it. So next time someone demands an explanation, pause, breathe, ask yourself, do they really need to know? Or are they just uncomfortable with the fact that I'm living on my own terms? And then decide, not out of guilt or fear, but from clarity. And if your answer is short, if it's simple, if it's just because I needed to, let that be enough. Let your life be lived through action, not explanation. You are not a press release. You are a human being. And your choices, when made with integrity and self-respect, are sacred. Treat them that way. Here's my challenge to you. The next time you're asked to defend your peace, your healing, your growth, don't let your silence say what words can't. Let your calm be your boundary. Let your confidence say, I trust myself. And that is enough. You're not here to make everyone else feel safe with your journey. You're here to walk it boldly, bravely, unapologetically. So stop explaining and start owning. Part 4. Keep your distance. Let's talk about something uncomfortable but necessary, the art of distance. Sometimes, the most powerful response to disrespect isn't a stare, or silence, or a short answer. Sometimes, it's space. Sometimes, you don't need to speak. You just need to step away. Create a gap, draw a line, and keep walking. Because the truth is, not everyone deserves a front row seat in your life. Not everyone has earned the right to be close to your heart, your energy, your story, and the sooner you accept that, the sooner you'll breathe easier. It doesn't mean you're cruel. It doesn't mean you're unforgiving. It means you've stopped giving your time to people who only know how to take. It means you've chosen your peace over your patterns. And that is one of the hardest, most liberating decisions you'll ever make. See, society will guilt you into staying connected. But they're your friend, but they're family, but you've known them for years. And yet no one seems to ask, how do they make you feel? Do you feel respected? Do you feel safe, heard, valued? Or do you feel like you're constantly walking on eggshells, bracing yourself for the next insult wrapped in a joke, the next subtle jab, the next moment where you smile through gritted teeth just to keep the peace? I've been there. I had a friend once, if you can even call it that, who seemed to have a comment for everything. My goals? Too unrealistic. My taste in music? Too basic. My lifestyle? Always up for judgment. At first, I excused it. Maybe they're just blunt, I thought. Maybe I'm too sensitive. But over time, I noticed how I felt around them. Tight, defensive, small. And the worst part? I kept showing up, kept inviting them into my world, hoping maybe they'd see me differently, treat me better, finally respect me. But that moment never came. So I stopped waiting. I didn't write a dramatic farewell. I didn't send a final message. I just started stepping back, slowly. Intentionally. I created space. And in that space, I found clarity. I found peace. I found myself again. Keeping your distance isn't about being rude. It's about being rooted. It's about knowing who you are and what you will no longer tolerate. Because the more you grow, the more you'll see that your energy is sacred, and it's not for everyone. Some people only know how to subtract. They drain you, distract you, diminish you, and yet you keep them close out of habit, or guilt, or history. But what if history isn't a reason to stay? What if love isn't supposed to hurt? What if the most loyal thing you can do is to be loyal to yourself? I know how hard it is to create distance, especially when it's someone you care about. But here's something I learned. Protecting your peace doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care deeply about your health, your mental clarity, your emotional stability. It means you've reached a point where survival isn't enough. You want to thrive. And to thrive, you need clean air. You need space. You need room to breathe without fear of being diminished by the next conversation. You can love someone and still choose to step away. You can forgive someone and still decide they're not safe to be around. You can respect someone's humanity while recognizing that their presence in your life is toxic. That is not cold. That is wisdom. And let me say this, Distance doesn't have to be forever. Sometimes it's a pause, a reset, a reevaluation, and sometimes, yes, it's permanent, but whatever form it takes, it is your right to create it. You do not owe constant access to anyone who treats your worth like an option. You are not required to keep opening the door just because they keep knocking louder. The volume of their presence does not determine the value of their place in your life. When you keep your distance, you get your power back. You start choosing your circle with intention, not obligation. You start making decisions from a place of strength instead of fear. And most of all, you start healing. You stop pouring into empty vessels. You stop trying to prove your worth to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop trying to fix what was never yours to fix. You stop trying to earn space in hearts that were never open to begin with. Here's my challenge to you. Think about someone in your life who constantly drains you. Someone whose presence leaves you feeling smaller, not stronger. Now ask yourself, why are they still so close? What would it feel like to step back, not with anger, but with clarity? What would happen if you stopped answering every call, attending every gathering, engaging every argument? What if you simply let go? What if you stopped chasing their approval and started reclaiming your peace? This is not abandonment. This is alignment. This is not selfishness. This is self-respect. And once you taste that kind of peace, the peace that comes from protecting your energy, you'll never want to go back. Because life is too short to be spent trying to be enough for people who were never ready to receive you. You don't need to prove yourself to earn space. You simply need to honor yourself enough to protect it. So if you feel like someone has been sitting too close to your fire while constantly throwing shade, move the chair. If you feel like someone's voice is always the loudest when it's tearing you down, mute it. If you feel like you're giving access to someone who only takes, revoke it. Distance isn't cruelty. Distance is clarity. And sometimes, that clarity is the first breath of freedom you've had in years. Part 5. Hold your head high. Let's talk about posture, not just the physical kind, but the kind that lives in your spirit. Because when you walk through a world that's constantly trying to shrink you, belittle you, second-guess you, one of the most radical things you can do is hold your head high. It sounds simple, maybe even cliché, but don't be fooled. This isn't about pride. It's about presence. It's about standing tall, not just in your body, but in your belief in who you are. When someone disrespects you, they're not just trying to bruise your ego. They're trying to bend your posture. They want you to look down, to doubt yourself, to second-guess your worth. But when you hold your head high, you're sending a silent, powerful message. I know who I am, and I'm not moved by your noise. See, confidence has a strange effect on people who rely on disrespect to feel powerful. It throws them off. It disrupts their script. They're used to others flinching, reacting, retreating. They feed off insecurity. So when you walk in, shoulders back, eyes forward, grounded and composed, you become unpredictable, and that's unsettling. You're not playing their game anymore. You're not shrinking to make them feel big. You're not bowing to fit into their comfort zone. You're rising, and people don't always know how to handle that. I remember being around someone who always had a little something to say. You know the type, always a smirk, always a joke that cuts just a little too deep, always acting like their comments are harmless. At first, I'd laugh along. I didn't want to seem too sensitive. I didn't want to make it awkward. But over time, I started noticing how much it was chipping away at me. My confidence, my voice, my energy. Until one day, I decided to show up differently. I didn't argue. I didn't fight back. I just walked in like I belonged there. I didn't lower my gaze. I didn't shrink my presence. And when the jokes came, I smiled, not nervously, not apologetically, but with calm clarity. And then I kept moving. And you know what? The comments stopped. The vibe shifted. Because I wasn't giving them the reaction they were used to. I was too far above that nonsense, and they could feel it. Holding your head high is not just about physical posture. It's a declaration. It says, I refuse to let your words define me. I refuse to let your insecurity become my reflection. I refuse to internalize your projections as my truth. When you walk with confidence, not arrogance, but quiet self-belief, you become untouchable in a way that rattles small minds. You send a signal that says, I am not available for this energy. And that signal does more than just protect you. It empowers others, because every time you choose dignity over reaction, every time you carry yourself with grace instead of fury, you remind others that there's a higher road. And let me be clear, this isn't about pretending everything is okay. It's not about burying your hurt or acting like nothing affects you. It's about recognizing that you don't owe every critic your breakdown. You don't owe every insult your attention. You don't owe every challenge your collapse. You are allowed to stand tall, even when you're healing, especially when you're healing. That's when it matters most. There's something magnetic about a person who holds their head high, not because they think they're better, but because they refuse to act like they're less. And yes, that kind of presence will attract criticism. It will make insecure people uncomfortable. It will challenge the stories they tell themselves about where you belong. But let them squirm. That's not your burden to carry. You weren't born to tiptoe around other people's fragility. You were born to take up space. The world needs more people who walk like they know their worth, who speak like their voice matters, who carry themselves not with arrogance, but with the steady calm of someone who no longer needs external permission to be whole. When you hold your head high, you're not ignoring reality, you're shaping it. You're choosing to lead with strength instead of defense, with presence instead of apology, with courage instead of fear. Here's my challenge to you. The next time someone tries to make you feel small, through words, through actions, through tone, don't flinch. Don't fold. Stand taller. Hold your gaze. Keep your head high. And in that moment, remember this: respect isn't always given. But self-respect? That's yours to claim. No one can take it from you unless you hand it over. So stop handing it over. Stop diluting your power to comfort the discomfort of others. Stop shrinking just to keep the peace. Because peace built on your silence isn't peace, it's a prison. The more you practice holding your head high, the more natural it becomes. It becomes your shield, your statement, your way of saying, I won't be broken by small minds or loud voices. I am rooted in something deeper, something unshakable. And every time someone tries to pull you down, you'll remember, you don't live down there anymore. You've elevated, you've evolved, you've earned the right to stand tall. And one day, you'll look back at all the times you held your ground, all the times you kept your dignity intact while others lost theirs. And you'll realize, that posture didn't just protect you. It built you. It shaped the version of you that no longer needs applause to feel worthy or explanation to feel clear. You became your own foundation, your own calm, your own standard. So whatever room you walk into today, walk in like you belong. Not because you need to prove it, but because you finally believe it. Stand tall, keep your chin up, walk in truth, because nothing is more powerful than a soul that knows its worth, and wears it without shame. And there it is, 5 ways to handle people who don't respect you, without losing your center. Without giving away your peace. You don't need to yell to be heard. You don't need to fight to be strong. And you don't need to prove your worth to people who were never looking to see it. Respect begins within, the way you carry yourself, the boundaries you protect, the energy you refuse to waste. That's where your power lives. So walk tall, stay grounded, and remember, silence doesn't mean surrender. Distance doesn't mean bitterness. It means you've matured into someone who no longer reacts to noise, but responds with wisdom. If this message spoke to something deep in you, if it reminded you of who you are beneath the chaos, I invite you to stay connected. Subscribe to the Chill Stoic for more grounded, powerful conversations on how to live with intention, strength, and stillness in a world that rarely slows down. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, send it their way. We're all walking our own path, but it helps to know we're not walking alone. Thanks for spending this time with me. Until next time, stay calm, stay kind, and stay true to your higher self.